You know, when we think about money, our brains immediately jump to math, right? We think about spreadsheets, complex formulas, interest rates, the hard numbers. But what if I told you that getting wealthy has less to do with how smart you are and way more to do with how you act? That's what we're digging into today, the idea that our relationship with money is almost entirely driven by psychology. So let me just throw a question at you to get us started. Who do you think would end up better off with their money? A humble janitor who spent his life fixing cars and sweeping floors? Or a high-flying executive from Merrill Lynch, complete with a Harvard MBA? The answer is probably not what you're thinking. And honestly, it tells you just about everything you need to know about how money really works.
So let's explore this by diving into the true stories of two men. Their lives and their financial fortunes went in completely opposite directions.
Okay, so in one corner we have Ronald Reed. This guy was a gas station attendant for 25 years, and then a janitor at JCPenney for another 17. He lived a super simple, really frugal life. And in the other corner, Richard Fuscone. He was the picture of Wall Street elite. Harvard MBA, top executive at Merrill Lynch. I mean, people were praising his business savvy while he was living this incredibly luxurious life. One guy had zero formal training. The other had the best financial education money could possibly buy.
Well, when Ronald Reed died at age 92, the world was absolutely stunned to find out what his net worth was. $8 million. And there was no lottery ticket, no secret inheritance. He just saved what little he could, put it into blue-chip stocks, and then he waited for decades. And those tiny savings compounded into an absolute fortune. So what about the Harvard MBA? Richard Fuscone's story went the complete opposite way. He borrowed huge amounts of money to expand his already massive mansion, and then the 2008 financial crisis hit. His whole high-debt, illiquid lifestyle just came crashing down. He was completely wiped out.
And that mansion? Get this, it cost Fuscone over $90,000 a month just in maintenance. All his financial brilliance couldn't save him from behavior that was just totally unsustainable. And here's the real kicker. Ronald Reed was patient, and Richard Fuscone was greedy. That simple behavioral gap mattered more than any difference in their education or their income.
This story just perfectly illustrates the core idea we're going to unpack right now. The key insight here is that financial success is actually a soft skill. It has less to do with the complex formulas you know, and way more to do with managing your own psychology. You know, things like greed, fear, patience, and your own expectations. This is exactly why a janitor can outperform a Wall Street executive. Ronald Reed had mastered his behavior, while Richard Fuscone, for all of his incredible knowledge, clearly had not.
The author of the book, Morgan Housel, puts it perfectly with this quote. Richard Fuscone was that genius who lost control and ended up a financial disaster. And Ronald Reed? He was the opposite, just an ordinary person whose incredible discipline and patience led to truly extraordinary wealth.
But, you know, our behavior isn't the entire story. We also have to talk about two really powerful forces that are completely out of our hands, the identical twins of luck and risk.
Think about this for a second. Back in 1968, a teenage Bill Gates got to attend Lakeside School. This was a 1 in a million shot because it was one of the only high schools on the planet with a computer. That's just incredible luck. But at that same school was his best friend, Ken Evans, who was just as smart and just as driven. They had plans to go into business together, but then tragically, Kent died in a mountaineering accident before he could even graduate, a 1 in a million risk. You see that? The same force, luck and risk, just pointing in opposite directions.
The lesson here is pretty profound. When you see someone who's wildly successful, you've got to remember the hidden role that luck probably played. And when you see failure, whether it's in other people or even in yourself, remember the role of risk. It helps you stay humble when things are going great and be a little more forgiving when they're not, because nothing is ever 100% the result of your own efforts.
So if luck and risk are so powerful, what can we actually control? Well, the most important skill might just be the simplest one of all. Just sticking around. Just take a look at Warren Buffett's wealth. Of his roughly $84.5 billion net worth, over 99% of it, let me say that again, over 99% was earned after his 50th birthday. This chart shows that his real superpower wasn't just being a great investor, it was being a great investor for 3/4 of a century.
What this really shows is that longevity is the magic ingredient that lets compounding do its thing. You don't actually need the highest returns in the world to get rich. What you need are pretty good returns that you can stick with for the longest possible time. Survival is everything.
And this leads us to a fascinating paradox. Getting wealthy and staying wealthy are two completely different skills. Getting money requires you to take risks, to be optimistic. But keeping that money, that requires the total opposite. Humility and a healthy dose of paranoia that everything you've made can be taken away just as fast. The very mindset that gets you rich can be the one that makes you poor again.
Nassim Taleb just nails it with this quote. It doesn't matter how great your investment edge is if you get wiped out along the way. Your most important job always is to avoid ruin. You have to stay in the game long enough for compounding to work its magic for you.
Okay, so let's bring this all home. We've talked about behavior, we've talked about luck, and we've talked about survival. So what's the ultimate goal here, and how do we actually get there?
Here are 3 practical rules you can think about. First, build a margin of safety. This is your defense against risk. A frugal budget is one way, but so is just being flexible in your thinking. Richard Fuscon had no margin for error. Ronald Reed's entire life was one. Second, focus on broad, repeatable patterns, like saving consistently, not on the 1 in a million luck of someone like Bill Gates. And third, try to be what's called a rational optimist. Believe that things will work out in the long run, but be paranoid enough about the short-term risks to make sure you survive to see it. And this is why it all matters. The real point of building wealth isn't about getting a bigger house or a faster car. It's not about being able to buy more stuff. Money's greatest, most universal value is its power to give you autonomy, to give you control over your own time.
And at the end of the day, this is the final takeaway. The biggest dividend that money pays is freedom. The freedom to choose. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want. That's not just a financial goal, that's the definition of a well-lived life. So maybe the real question isn't just how to get more money, but how to get more control.